The International Festival of Arts and Ideas is created and produced on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Paugussett, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac, in the land we all call home, Connecticut. We hope that from wherever you are, you take a moment to acknowledge and honor the native people whose land you are on and the history of the place you are in.
The International Festival of Arts and Ideas stands in solidarity with Black and Brown communities and other groups who are targeted and abused by unjust systems of oppression. We support all movements working to decenter white voices and dismantle white supremacy. We are actively seeking to dismantle systemic racism, and we raise our voices with those in our community who are already engaged in this vital work. We commit to working alongside you to create transformative change in New Haven and in our global community.
Oh, hello, everyone. Welcome to the 27th Annual International Festival of Arts and Ideas. Welcome to the Yale Repertory Theater, and for those watching on the NBC Telemundo virtual stage, welcome. My name is Annie Lin. I'm the arts director at the Yale China Association. I also serve on the board of the Festival of Arts and Ideas, and I am a FAWK fan. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank the Connecticut Humanities, whose partnership makes this Ideas program possible and ensures that we can continue to present programs for free every single year. Finally, a quick thank you to the festival's marquee sponsors who are helping to bring more than 200 events this June. 200 events this June. Can we get a hand of applause? Thank you. Those marquee sponsors are the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, Yale University, National Endowment for the Arts, thank you, NEA, the Connecticut Office for the Arts, the City of New Haven, and again, our friends at Connecticut Humanities. There are many more amazing events to come at this festival, including things on the New Haven Green and 4 more Ideas talks. I know I'm really excited to take my family to see the Marble Wall on the New Haven Green on Saturday and Sunday, as well as see Air Temple Arts for some circus and aerial arts and lessons Saturday and Sunday. So come out and meet me there. For those 4 more Ideas talks, I'm excited to say that 2 of them will be presented in Spanish with English translation, including Welcoming American Hero, Dolores Huerta, here in New Haven on Saturday. Don't miss this last weekend of the big summer festival. Make sure you check out our full list of programming at artidea.org and fill out, I think it's Taj, right, Denise? Taj with the Economic Impact Survey while you're on the green and around the festival. Enjoy yourselves. Before I introduce our incredible speakers and our moderator, I'd like to just say and recognize who is not in the room with us today. And this is a very important week for many of us who pay attention to things around social and racial justice. This is the 40th anniversary of the murder of Vincent Chen. In fact, today was the day, 40 years ago, that he passed away in the hospital, 4 days after his brutal attack. That is really important for us today for many reasons, because there are many things that are happening still today, and many people who are not with us today, whether it's in this theater or just in our lives and in our community. And so I just want to take a moment to recognize that. I'd also like to say that FAWK, Funny Asian Women Kollective, is many people, but one of the people who is not here today is Semukta Vongsai, and just want to shout out to her, wherever you are, I know you're watching, we love you, we shout out to you, we miss you on the stage. And so without any further ado, I would love to welcome on stage the incredible Naomi Ko and Mei Li Yang from FAWK, and our incredible moderator, our own New Haven, Christine Kim. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Laughing Matters with the Funny Asian Women Kollective, or FAWK, or FAWKing, or I guess it's a verb, adverb, noun, any way you'd like to use it. But it is an honor for me to introduce this panel, this ideas talk tonight with all of you. My name is Christine Kim, and I'm the co-founder of AAPI New Haven, which is a new intergenerational pan-Asian collective trying to dismantle racism and to create community and voice and visibility for Asian Americans in our area and beyond. So it is a true honor to be here with all of you all tonight and to introduce our two speakers from FAWK tonight. May Li Yang, who is a playwright and performance artist and educator, and Naomi Ko, who is a filmmaker and a writer, and also she would like everyone to know that she is single. So, yes. So FAWK, the Funny Asian Women Collective, was founded in 2014 to combat the invisibility and dehumanization of Asian Pacific Islander Desi American women using humor and comedy. And as many of you know, a lot of, at least the beginning of API New Haven, which was just started last year, and a lot of you maybe have heard of a lot of anti-Asian hate in the news over the past year or two, although like Annie was saying, it's the 40th anniversary of Vincent Chen, who was murdered in Detroit due to anti-Japanese sentiment, even though he was Chinese American, is really a moment that not just the Asian American community, but hopefully the world community has recognized and highlighted, unfortunately, some negative light, some of what our experience has been, but we do want to also highlight the amazing spirit, talent, community, people, voices of the very, very diverse Asian American community we have. And I actually first wanted to ask you, because there has been some confusion about it, I'm confused about it as well, but you used APIDA, Asian Pacific Islander Desi American, and some people use Asian Americans, AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander, Asian American Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian, and so where did you come on the current acronym of describing
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, we move back and forth.
Okay.
And I think that's because, I mean, so we started Funny Asian Women Collective saying, you know, Asian American, right? And then we said Asian and Asian American, because some Asians are not Americans, but they've been living here for a while. And then we ended up on APIDA, Asian Pacific Islander Desi American, to be more inclusive, because we had members that we obviously consider as South Asian Americans, but I know that they're not always included at the table, so we really wanted to highlight that. And I have been in spaces where we have, not we, FAWK, but other places where folks have used AAPI, right? But then we've made the decision not to put the PI because we actually did not have any Pacific Islanders, so we did not want to create the illusion of inclusivity when in fact those folks were not represented in the space. So I think it kind of just depends.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this is the difficulty of being a part of the Asian, what I define as like the western part of Istanbul, of Asian Minor, crossing through Central Asia, through the stands, Mongolia, to the islands, Japan, and down to the islands, is that we're such an expansive group of people that we can't necessarily say, you know, Central Asians, Mongolians, South Asians, East Asians, Pacific Islander, like it gets too long, and we don't have enough word count sometimes to describe who we are.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to also just call us I will say Asian American for now, or we'll switch terms just so that everyone knows and understands and feels comfortable with that.
And can I just say to Christine that whenever FAWK does an event, or for example, if we have an open call for auditions, we're just like, we want to center Asian American, female, and non-binary identified spaces. So if you think you're one of us, come. That's all. We don't know. You tell us, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, what is the origin story of the FAWK superhero story of where you started, what kind of, childhood thing happened, and what vat of super radioactive thing you fell into to create FAWK and who you are now?
Yeah. Let me start it off and you can finish it.
Okay.
Once upon a time, on a Thursday night in 2014, Naomi Ko was invited to do a poetry reading in downtown St. Paul.
That's in Minnesota. Yeah.
I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, so first mistake, not a poet. Why am I at a poetry reading? But I don't have deep thoughts like that and not in that format. So the organizer of this event, who is actually our co-founder Saimukta's cousin, so she is also an Asian woman.
You're gonna call her out publicly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give her credit publicly. I mean.
Oh no.
Yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, so we were at this event and she told me, "Hey Naomi, you can't swear or talk about sex." And I was like, "Oh, okay, interesting. And what am I going to talk about? What am I going to do?" And when I was performing on stage, I bombed. I completely bombed. I didn't know what I was saying. I was really insecure. I kept pausing because I kept catching myself about to say something quote unquote inappropriate. And May and her husband and Mux and her husband, Saimukta and her partner were in the audience. And afterwards, basically everyone told me that I sucked. And I mean, I did. I did suck.
Yeah, she literally, she would be performing and she would go like, because she was censoring herself very visibly, right?
Yeah. And then afterwards, while we were having drinks at your office in downtown St. Paul, all of us were kind of just talking about this experience of being Asian American women and constantly being told to censor ourselves. That one, we can't talk a certain way or act a certain way or talk about certain subject matter because one, we're gonna make our family look bad, our community look bad, our elders look bad. This whole idea of like, oh, we're model minorities, and then with the added weight of the gender stereotype as well, and we can't act this way, we can't talk this way, and we realize like, what would it be like if Asian female identifying bodies could be their authentic selves? And what would that look like if we could be truly uncensored? And therefore, that's how FAWK actually came to be. Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
May, did you want to add anything to that? Great.
Well, I mean, we came up with our name that night. We were like, let's be FAWK, Funny Asian Women. And we didn't know what the K stood for. We're like, ... K. And we applied for several grants and got them with that name. Yeah. And then one day we realized, K, collective, do a Korean, an homage to the Koreans. Yeah. So anyway. Yeah.
For the one Korean, me.
I suppose if it matters, it might be, I think it probably does matter to know that I'm Hmong. We're one of the more mysterious Asian groups out there. Thank you, Sinisa Lee and the Hunter Chai Soving for elevating us to celebrity status. And Naomi's Korean. And Saimukta, who's not here, is Lao, another very mysterious Asian group. And a lot of the folks who come through as FAWK rolling members have been a part of various identities. And so we have organically been very pan-Asian. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and also I would like to say that we're from very different socioeconomic groups. May and Mux are both refugees. A lot of us come from, including myself, from working immigrant class families, and then also a diversity in age. We have people in their 20s all the way through their 50s, so we're pretty diverse in terms of age as well.
And you're also from a very mysterious place called Minnesota.
Yes.
To some of us on the East Coast. So, we have a slideshow that sort of goes into more about telling you all about FAWK and the amazing work that they've been doing. So, Naomi, if you wanted to start.
Yeah, so that's us. May is on the left, I'm in the middle, and Mooks is on the right. We got some grant money, so we decided finally after 8 years that maybe we should take a professional photo. Because the photo we were using was a photo of us in Mooks's kitchen. May, you want to talk a little bit about the workshops that we do?
Yeah, some of the things that work that FAWK does is we hold these things called Clapback Workshops. They're essentially workshops that teach folks, we originally started with just Asian women, to clap back against microaggressions. And so there's a picture there with all these Post-it notes. We call that the cube of oppression because we essentially ask participants to write down microaggressions that they've experienced. So the cube probably says things like, go back to your country, I don't know.
Your English is so good.
Yeah, can you make me an egg roll? And stupid stuff like that. And so, but throughout the workshop, we teach people how to use comedy to clap back against people so they'll feel stupid, but you don't get beat up.
Yeah, and some of the work that we also do is working with other, doing a lot of intersectional work. So right here, we worked with Blackout Improv, which is an all-black improv troupe, to try to, they're also clapback workshops, but we're also trying to teach Asian, not female identifying folks how to do comedy. So we brought in Women's History Month, which is an all-female comedy group. And so we try to partner with different local comedy-esque groups in the Twin Cities as a way to try to build power and also learn how to do shit.
And can I just say, we've done these workshops at, for the community, in the schools, and also for government entities. And can I just say that the government entities have had probably the worst the worst microaggressions. I'm just like, y'all experience this at work? Sorry.
Yeah. It's rough out there. Yeah. And in 2018, we kicked off doing something called the Clapback Cabaret. So we would have these workshops where we would teach how to do clapbacks, but because we always knew that using comedy is a great way to, disarm tension and also to fight back in a way that, like what May said, won't get you killed. But we also wanted a place where people could just essentially try out, because for so many people who are of the Asian diaspora, being a part of the arts and being especially being a part of comedy is just not, it's not accessible. It's something that most people can't even fathom. And this is also during the time when we always knew this as women, but there's a reason why we don't frequent comedy clubs, because we're not trying to get sexually assaulted, aka be a victim of Louis C.K. and other folks. So we wanted to create a space that would be led by women so that other Asian American women could come to this space and feel safe to perform without running the risk of being sexually harassed. So we did 12 different shows. We had different people coming from all over the country. One of our performers was Atsuko Akatsuka, who is, she's a good friend, and she actually helped us kick off our series.
Yep.
And then here are some of our partnerships and collaborations. The Minneapolis Institute of Arts asked us to do a video on their Asian collection. So, we did have to rein back a little bit of the ratchetness because this was for kids, but that's different. We also worked with this organization called the Center for Cultural Power, based out of Oakland. They're doing a lot of great work there too. And we also have worked with a lot of great Asian female identifying comics as well, including Kati Vasco on the top and Atsuko in the middle and Kulap Vilasek on the bottom. You can talk about this.
Yeah, so this is their super show. So as Naomi said, we kicked off part of our FAWK work doing small cabarets, but in 2019 we went to the Ordway Center for Performing Arts. I want to do a shout out to Shelly Kiela, the executive director of the Festival for Art and Ideas. We met her through Ordway originally, and she's been a great champion of our work. So at the cabarets, I think we could accommodate maybe 150, 200 bodies. At the Ordway, we were able to accommodate 900 bodies, and people came. And but I think what's important about this show is that at that time, the Ordway historically had been doing the show Miss Saigon, and there was a lot of protests in the community about to try to prevent the show from coming back. And FAWK, I think, through Shelley and the executive director at the time, was able to do a little community bending. Oh, that was a Freudian slip. Mending. So anyway, that's all I'm gonna say. We can keep moving, so that we can go to Christine's questions too.
Yeah, and during the pandemic, we had a bunch of shows scheduled because our first show at the Ordway was in 2019, so we started to get hot. And then the pandemic happened, and then, shit happened. And also the rise of anti-Asian hate really started to spark, especially in Minnesota. The Minnesota Department of Health actually opened a hotline, and they received 3,000 calls within the first week. And while some of them was to report anti-Asian hate crimes, many of the calls were actually to say that Asians were responsible for the COVID pandemic. Yeah. And we decided, like, hey, let's get back out there. Let's bring some joy back to our communities. So we actually went to 4 different locations in Eastside St. Paul, which is our home base in the Twin Cities, and just really trying to bring some joy and bring some life back into the community. We had some FAWK members from our first Ordway show return. So we just got on her husband's truck and just went around town, and we actually partnered up with different food trucks and provided free meals to our attendees because, it's not a party without food. Mm-hmm. We didn't provide alcohol, though, because that's considered a liability. And then there's press. Yeah, it's nice. So that's just a little bit about us. Yeah. Oh, wait, never mind.
A couple more slides.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Show them. Since the pandemic has been kind of, I don't know. Since we all got vaccinated, we decided to go back on the stage for the first time this year. So this was just a show that we did back at the Ordway in April. And as you can see, folks are masked up. It was great to be back in community.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and
Naomi lamenting about needing a husband, so.
No, this is actually about how we need to stop Asian hate we can just let Asians date.
Yeah.
It's actually a very poignant political statement. And also it's for me, it's personal.
Helping you.
This is the thing, you can be for the community and also for yourself at the same time. And then this is our performers, and the reason why our hands are tucked into our pants is because we were shouting out Mux's son, who at the time was taking a lot of photos of his hands in his pants like that. He's also like 3 years old.
It's an homage to a 3-year-old boy.
Yeah, but that's why we thought it was funny, so that's why we did it. But yeah, that's just a little bit about us.
Great, thank you so much. You're not going to perform tonight, but can you describe sort of the work that you do? You said you're not doing stand-up. How can you describe your performance in art and what you do during these shows, and also like the formats of the workshops? If you could just give examples of what you're doing.
I mean, for us, comedy can exist as it can exist as stand-up. Could exist as sketches. It could exist as improv. I'll be honest, we're not that good at improv. It also can exist as videos. So it's pretty fluid about what we think is comedy can be. The interesting thing is we also get hired to, again, talk about ourselves because I think people recognize that our work is politicized, right? Whether we intend it or not. Because they know they're going to get people who are going to say some interesting things, but also entertain them, right? Naomi, you want to add anything else?
No, I mean, and I think in terms of our workshops, we kind of use hybrid training as artists, as theater artists to, do some theater exercises at the beginning to kind of loosen people up and get the blood flowing and the juices flowing, as they say, and then kind of get right into it where we ask people to write down, like spend 10 minutes writing down all the microaggressions. And at first we actually blocked out like half an hour, but people got done in like 5 minutes because
It was easy.
Yeah, it was easy. They're holding all this shit inside. They're like, yeah, all this. It's sad that all this fucked up shit happens to us. And then we kind of go through different techniques where we actually like one of us will play like the perpetrator.
It's usually Naomi.
Yeah. As the East Asian and mostly Southeast Asian spaces, I guess I am the perpetrator. Like, but we make a joke about that, which is fine because East Asians have played our part in oppression. But and we kind of demonstrate how things can look and kind of go through different scenarios and kind of do a reflection at the end of it to make sure people feel not as traumatized but empowered.
Yeah, we practice, and then there are people who are, we talk about options, right? Because sometimes when people, you're experiencing microaggression, some people are really good at verbalizing something, right? And then some people are stuck, and so we talk about, well, how can you use your body or your face or your just sounds to kind of clap back, right? And then if people have problems, then we as a group collectively help them come up with things. I mean, the idea is that you practice so the next time you see something, you experience something, you can respond to it, right?
Yeah.
How did you find this like superpower of being funny and clapping back, and you know, after experiencing microaggressions and racism at various levels, how did like each of you individually experience that and find, oh, this is a way I can do this. I'm funny. I can make people laugh. I could also make them, you know, cringe and turn around and, you know, just when did you first realize that and that you could do this together in this collective?
So all of us outside of FAWK, we have different careers, right?
Yeah.
But actually, the three of us are English majors, so shout out to English majors. I know, right? Like 3 Asian ladies with English majors. People are always like, how did that happen? How didn't your parents kill you? Anyway, whatever. I was born in a refugee camp. My parents were just glad we were alive. So, but all of us are writers first and foremost, and then you know some of us do. Samukta and I do theater, and you used to do theater, but now you're in film. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we dabble in other things as well. But I feel like years ago, I used to be part of this spoken word group, and there were 10 members. That was crazy and stupid. But they always put me in the middle, or they always put me in the middle of sets that were really depressing. Because, I mean, and so they kept calling me the equalizer because they realized people are going to talk about being oppressed, and I probably wrote a poem about being oppressed too, but somehow the tone came off better. It helped the audience breathe a little bit more, right? And then I wrote plays, you know, like one of my plays is called Confessions of a Lazy Hmong Woman, right? And I wrote a play called The Korean Drama Addict's Guide to Losing Your Virginity. So I'd have these plays, and so, again, I didn't identify as a comedy writer. But people were like, that's comedy. And so I think through FAWK, I felt more empowered to say, to own up, to own that mantle and say, I write comedy, I do comedy.
Yeah, my story is a little different in that I had to learn how to be really funny at a very young age. I grew up in suburban Minnesota, the suburbs of the Twin Cities, in a mostly white place. And so there came a time when I faced oppression, I would physically use my body, and when I got, as May likes to call it, I was a known bully growing up. But then there comes a certain point where, like, yeah, when kids push each other, oh, it's a different story. But when adults start pushing each other, then it becomes assault. And so using comedy was a way to really try to fight back against some of the racism and oppression that I face in a world that was really, like, Minnesotans are really passive aggressive. So how are you going to be able to make them feel like, make it like dig the wound deep? I don't, whatever. We're English majors, but I can't talk. But using comedy as a way, as a really strong defense mechanism. And so I actually, for most of my high school and college and post-college life, I knew comedy was a strong point for me because it was something, it was a tool I kind of had to hone in to survive.
Thank you. I'm so going off all the questions that we agreed upon, so I apologize, but I'm just really interested. Can you help us, or at least help me and teach me, like, some of your methods of this clapback? I mean, I always think of comebacks after things are done and after I've been flooded and totally. And sometimes I will say things that make no sense to the person, and they're just, I actually get back at them because they're just so confused about what I said that they just walk away. But how do you run these workshops, and how could we deal with it? Not just like directly as an Asian American, but if, you know, our friends and allies who are with us, and sometimes it's just overwhelming, right? Because I have all of these memories from...
I think it's good to gauge a couple things first. Where are you located, right? Is this a work situation? Is this, are you walking on the street? Are you by yourself? Are you among friends, right? So that helps you to determine, are you at a club or a bar?
Like amongst friends or among friends?
I don't know. I don't know.
Amongst,
yeah.
among.
Oh, yeah.
HM,
Yes.
Just,
Sorry, your puns, sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
My bad.
Bad pun, sorry.
I'm actually a fan of puns too, but but like, so I think, first of all, because my go-to, because I have a hard time thinking on my feet, so my go-to is always, where are you from? I'm like, fuck you, like just, you know, so that's my go-to, right? But, you know, if you're working, maybe you can't say those things, you might get fired, right?
Yeah.
And so I think gauging your space, first of all. I think also you need to be cognizant of your body and physically what can you do. Naomi can be very aggressive with people at bars. I can't because I'm not even 5 feet. So I'm like, I can get my ass kicked, right? I can get assaulted easily here. Yeah. So I'm not going to go for the aggressive route. So I got to use the, you know, putting you down with my words route, you know?
Because when someone says a microaggression to me, if I'm sitting down, one of my favorite things to do is just to stand up. And then they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, bitch, sit down. Sit your ass down. Like, yeah.
But I do think that one of the power in coming, in occupying the bodies that look like this, right? Asian female bodies, is that people have such low expectations. The stereotype is that we don't say anything, we don't do anything, we keep our mouth shut. Maybe we don't even speak English. And so when they say something dumb and you're like, shut the fuck up, they're like, ooh, first of all, English, right? And then secondly, whoa, she spoke back. And so I think that throws people off their game. But I also think part of it is practice.
Yeah.
Practice your line. I'll be very honest. One of my favorite personal comebacks, I had to practice that shit so that I could make sure I could put people in their places.
What is it?
Well, because I'm really short, a lot of people like to come up to me and say, oh, May, you're so short. Or did you know you were short? I'm like, yeah, bitch, I'm not blind. But I was teaching some high school students, right? And they kept saying, Miss May, why are you so short? And so finally one day I was like, do you want to know why I'm so short? It's because I was born in a fucking refugee, sorry, I didn't say it. I was in high school, so I didn't say it that word. I said I was born in a refugee camp, which means I didn't have access to health or nutrition. Are you happy with that now? And they're like, oh, Miss May, I'm so sorry. I'm like, yeah. I totally meant to shame these high school students. But I couldn't have thought of things like that on my feet, right? I practiced it with some 6th graders first. And then, you know, it landed pretty well with landed pretty well with the high school students. So, I don't know.
What about you, Naomi, in terms of clapping
I mean,
back?
it depends. I'm just trying to think.
What's let's like the most recent one you've heard? Like,
Yeah. So there was this guy who said, he said, I thought Korean women are supposed to be pretty. How come you're not as pretty as them? And I was like, well, at least I'm still prettier than you.
No,
I mean, that was the most recent one at the airport.
Yeah. I think another method is if you can totally just be kind and ask a question. Like if somebody says something dumb, like I don't know, do you have a microaggression you want to throw at me or anyone?
anyone from the audience, do you have a microaggression that you would like to get out?
Well, yeah, just that you've
We
heard.
can't see where you, we can't see you with all these stage lights, so don't worry, we can identify you.
Chinese, I like that. Okay, Chinese, I like that. Well, Sorry, my first instinct is, well, I don't like you. No, but I was thinking, I mean, another way to also, if you want to do it in a kind way, is, I was actually, yeah. I think is you cannot just ask the question back, like, why would you say that? Or, I'm thinking about people who won't realize, because there are people you need to be aggressive to, right? And then, like think about the really nice, maybe older coworker who really means well, who are just like, wow, I think your people are so cute, and you don't really want to offend them because you're like, they don't really mean to be microaggressive, they just are. So maybe that's a situation where you say something like, why would you say that, Carol? How can you stereotype my people like that? I don't think of white people in that way. I don't know, you shame people. Sorry, that's the Minnesotan coming out of me.
Yeah, we like to shame people.
Yeah.
I've had, do you know Bruce Lee? And I said, I do, and I love his films. Enter the Dragon, and I also really like Egg Foo Young, and just threw a bunch of things that, like, I assumed that they would assume and stereotype about us. But no, I think that's a good idea to practice, to write some good zingers down, practice it, and yeah. Anyway, well, thank you. One thing that you, as funny Asian women, you occupy many different spaces and community, and doing your comedy in the cultural zeitgeist of American comedy, or being a person of color, or BIPOC, Asian American, or a lot of the acronyms we talked about, being Hmong American or Korean American, or anything, being refugee, being second generation or first generation, et cetera, or being Midwestern. How do you navigate those spaces, and how do you talk about it within FAWK and in your performances and the work that you do?
I think one of the things we do is that we acknowledge these identities that we hold, right? So we make a lot of like Southeast Asian and East Asian jokes. Like and Naomi is always like, I acknowledge my East Asian privilege. She shuts the fuck up when she needs to, right? And I feel like sometimes there are spaces where people are like, oh, we're all Asian here, and let's all be, we're all on equal footing. But the reality is that we're not. Like some people, they've like we keep bringing ourselves up as examples, but I mean, many of us were, Mux and I, for example, were born in refugee camps. My parents didn't have access to education. You're Korean, and people assume that you come from a highly educated family, and
yeah, and my parents are U.S. postal workers. Woo! Yeah, USPS. Yeah, and I think we have to name these things, and we name it pretty well. Like whenever we go into the space, we're always just like, we are a Pan-Asian American group, predominantly Southeast Asian, predominantly either refugee or children of refugees of a lower socioeconomic status based in Minnesota. We list all these things because even within, like, let's say, within the greater national Asian American space, people assume that, like, oh, you guys do the arts? Okay, are you from California or are you guys from New York? We're like, neither. We're from Minnesota. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, there are Asians in the Midwest. Go figure. And then even like within the national context, we say these identities because then people automatically just assume that we're immigrants or that we're not American at all.
Yeah, I think that most of the Asian Americans who get to speak about being Asian Americans are East and West Coast Asians, right? And so I think, Minnesota in general is considered flyover zone, regardless of your race, right?
Yeah.
And then to be Asian American and also be full of like refugee and immigrant communities, or recent immigrant communities, I feel like we're even more marginalized. And so I think we're always in conversation with ourselves, with each other, and among the United States in general, and then Asian American, the coastal Asian Americans. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I wish we could live in a world where we didn't have to talk about our identity markers so much and not have to continue to label, like, it to get to literally have a bullet point of exactly what we are. But the thing is that there is a lack of representation, and it doesn't matter what sector it is, of mostly of Asian Americans, and we're not in the mainstream, so we have to say these things. We have to continuously say these things because, you know, to say that some Korean American family from Los Angeles is very, like, that experience is very different from me, and an experience of some, like, for example, like among experience from Fresno, California is very different from among experience from St. Paul, Minnesota. So we name these differences because this country's not a monolith, we're not a monolith. There's so much diversity even within our own specific, I guess, ethnic and religious enclaves that we can't speak for a whole, and we try not to speak for a whole either.
Right. Yeah, we can't. I mean, I'm among women who are like, oh, you talk about being oppressed. I just learned about oppression during the pandemic. I'm like, oh, lucky for you, bitch. Okay, all right, it's great. I'm glad. Sorry, you could probably tell my age because I'm very bitter. No, but I think we talked about how FAWK is, our mission is to use comedy to combat the dehumanization and invisibility of Asian women, right? And we do that. I think this is so important. I personally think that the reason why so many Asian folks, particularly women, have been victimized, and especially during the pandemic, is because people don't see us as human enough, right? They see us as sex objects, as stereotypes, as nameless workers out in the world. And I think that when we tell our stories and we hold spaces for all of us to talk about our nuanced experiences, and the fact that we're not all like in the sciences, that we can do arts and that we can do comedy, like just by existing, we're combating stereotypes already, right? We're becoming, I think, more humanizing.
Yeah, please. I wanted to talk about making the process of making art, and you are both work in other mediums, but using comedy as art, especially within our communities, because comedy is not necessarily considered art, and how you approach that within the community and in the work with FAWK.
Yeah, I mean, a really great mentor of mine said that if you want to make people cry, laughter is the greatest way to make them cry because you earn their trust. And I think, comedy for me and for FAWK really, like how we do art making really comes from a place, like comes from a personal place. Like most artists you see out there, most of their work comes from a personal place. So, art making for us looks like, hey, let's grab drinks, let's sit around, let's figure some shit out. And then we test things out and we try to see if people laugh, it's good. If people don't laugh, we gotta move on. And
it's a hot mess, and it's okay. I think we need to give ourselves permission to be messy. And but I think one of the guiding lights of you is that we need to honor this uncensored space, right? We've had tension before, within our groups, as well as like with other folks in the community, because they're like, what are the boundaries that you shouldn't cross, right? And I feel like when we start, I think boundaries are important, but also where are the boundaries? Let me give you an example. I told you all that I have a play called The Korean Drama Addict's Guide to Losing Your Virginity. I used the word virginity, and I was asked, is that appropriate? What will your elders think? I'm like, these elders are not coming to see my show, okay? Unless you want to give me an arts access grant to turn this all into the Hmong language, they're not going to come see this show, and they're not the main audience. So anyway, stop censoring me. And so the level of censorship, right, is crazy. And so I feel like so but we need to lead with, let's be raw and uncensored, and sometimes it's too much for some people, and sometimes it's exactly what people needed to hear.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, like we really hold that so much to us that at our last Super Show at the Ordway in April, I made a joke about being a comfort woman, and my parents were in the audience. And for those who don't know, during
Comfort woman to a
girl, that's a lot.
Japanese.
man, yeah, it was a joke. It was a joke, but it set people on edge because Korea and Japan, not great history. Most recently, when the Japanese occupied Korea from 1910 through 1945, and they used Korean women as sex slaves called comfort women. I'm like, if I can make that joke in front of my Korean immigrant parents, then we. Like, this is really kind of the space that we're trying to cultivate. FYI, my parents did think the joke was pretty funny. They laughed. We have video evidence of them laughing about it, but
I forgot some smart person said art is political, and you've turned a lot of your work in comedy and with FAWK as very political. And I wanted to talk about how and why you've made your art activist in concrete ways. So I know you're working to vie for Minnesota state funding for a multimedia art center in St. Paul, and you've gotten embroiled in writing grants and politics, and in addition to your workshops to empower and marginalized voices to combat dissent. So can you talk about this brave activist work that you're doing through uncensoring, through showing the hot mess of ourselves as vulnerable and authentic people?
yeah, I mean, we're professional artists, we're writers, so we're professional communicators. So I think that makes us pretty ripe for doing activism work, because we're able to communicate certain ideas in a way that can get people to engage, and using comedy is a great way to do that, because if we can make legislators, gatekeepers laugh, then we can break through some of those barriers, and maybe not jump as many hoops. We still have to jump through hoops, but not as many. But right now we are working with the Minnesota State Legislature, and shout out to our Representative Jay Shong, who is our writer, and we're trying to build the first multimedia, state-of-the-art performing arts center
And media.
In St. Paul, Minnesota, that would kind of be the first of its kind in the whole United States, especially being run by Asian women, and we have the access to do it because we have land, unlike certain places on the coast. California, we have space, but also because we know how important it is to have a home, and to have institutional power and have institutional legacy, and so that's one of the things that we're doing right now. But yeah,
I mean, what I find really fascinating is that I don't think we started out saying we're going to be political, we're going to be activists. But when they say that our bodies are politicized, this is a great example of that, right? The fact that we wanted to tell our stories, wow, that's innovative, that's political. We wanted to create an uncensored space. Again, wow, innovative. We wanted to create a place where people could feel included, and emerging folks who didn't think of themselves as artists could try out art making for the first time. Suddenly, again, political, right? It's kind of, for me, that's kind of crazy. Basically, creating a space where you could be kind and feel like you're a human being is suddenly an innovative thing, right? What does that tell you about the world in which we live?
yeah.
And even this art center that we're trying to build, I think some people might be surprised that you are 3 comedians. What are you all trying to do? How are you trying to get a couple $1 million to build an art center? But there's support because there's a need, there's a hunger from folks in the community to have this kind of a space, right? It's not a pipe dream. It's not that we're a little delusional, it's true, because we drink a lot, but I think that there is support behind this, because it's not just our dream, it's the dream of so many folks in our community who want to be seen, who need visibility, who need a space just to perform, right?
Yeah, we're trying to build new systems, because it doesn't matter if you're in the arts, if you're in government, if you're in health, the health sector or tech sector. All of these systems have failed us. So as artists, as comedians, we know how important it is to build new systems. What's funny is that we're not only just artists, we're field builders.
Yeah.
We are field building right now too. Yeah.
Thank you. And we are also on time for our Q&A. We have about 15 minutes left for question and answer. And I think in your, we have gone total high tech, way beyond my own tech capacities, but in your programs or somewhere, there should be a QR code. And basically you take your smartphone device, and if you don't have one, you can borrow the person next to you. And online too, there should be a QR code, and you just point your camera app at it, and something should pop up, and you tap it, and you could put in your questions, anonymously or not, to us, and it will magically show up on this iPad, I think. And if not, we can go the old-fashioned way. So if we're ready for some questions, we already have some that have already come into the queue. So please do ask questions of Naomi, May, or myself if you want to, but they are far more interesting. First, what advice do you have for people who are inspired by what you do and want to create a similar movement where they live, like in Connecticut? Who would like to take that question?
We could start a franchise.
Yes, FAWK, yes.
But would that really empower the community here in Connecticut?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not? There's a lot of Asian folks here, man. I should know. I mean, I realized this when I realized how many Asian restaurants there were. I'm like, why are there so many Asian restaurants? I realized smart Asian people. That's right. I forgot about that. So, my advice is talk to us if you want. I think that's the first step. I will hand it off to you in case I say too much and offer too much.
Yeah, I mean, it's talk to us, but also talk to your friends. Well, FAWK honestly just started because 3 friends talked after my shitty performance, and having a conversation with your friends about trying to build something is a good test, because your friends are also going to be brutally honest. They're going to be like, no, that's stupid, or oh, that might work, or I know these resources. So it's really trying to build up who's your community, who's your support team, and starting off from there.
Who was allowed to join FAWK, and how would they do it if they wanted to start a franchise or join your group in the Twin Cities?
Do you identify as Asian, and do you identify as a female or non-binary person? Are you interested in comedy? Are you chill? Can we vibe with you? Then yeah, come.
Great.
Yeah,
And
that's it.
what are your website, social media, hashtag, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever, TikTok?
We're not on TikTok or on Snapchat, and our website is www.FAWK Collective. It's FAWKOLLECTIVE, and that is our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and our website is FAWKcollective.com. So, you know, yeah.
I have a question. I'll combine 2 questions. Who or what is your most surprising source of support you've had in your careers, and who are your inspirations? What artists inspire you?
The first question.
Besides
is that
BTS,
regarding-
because we've had a long BTS conversation, so.
I'm so passionate about BTS, and I'm not 14. Anyway. Who are surprisingly our biggest supporters?
I would say Black art makers, the Black community. I would say right away when FAWK came out, Blackout Improv was there to support us and to encourage us, and that kind of intersectionality has been really, really great. And white women, Heather at the
Not Karen, Heather and
Meyer
Karen.
at Women's History Month. Because we kind of expected that we would get support from our own community, even though within the Asian community there's lots of tension and lots of strife. But
But I think here's the thing too. When people ask, who are the Asian comedians in the Twin Cities, the answer is us, because we don't have that kind of, we didn't have that kind of community, right? If you go to the, you go to Chicago or like the coast, you can name drop a lot of folks. But because we were starting things off in the Twin Cities, we had Black folks and white women,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I also will have to say that a lot of the comedians that really inspired me growing up actually happen to be Black comedians too.
Yeah, same.
I think about Wanda Sykes,
Richard Pryor.
Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle at different times in their career. And I say this though, but because in comedy, but even beyond comedy, I think that a lot of Black folks have been pioneers because they were some of the most visible people of color, for me in education, in the pop culture, in public spaces. And, I think being from marginalized communities, they kind of like opened up the door as well. And
Yeah, it's
Not
really
surprised.
great that they wanted to uplift us too. Yeah.
And I know you wanted to give a shout out today on the anniversary.
Oh yeah, today is the 50th anniversary of Title IX, and we have to shout out former Representative Patsy Mink, yes, who is a Japanese American woman. She was the former state representative. She was the first woman of color, the first Asian American woman to be elected to the U.S. Congress, and the first Congress person ever from the state of Hawaii. And you gotta shout out the OGs, because we are just continuing, this line of already great work that so many folks have already done, and we're happy to be a part of that legacy, or we think we're a part of their legacy, at least.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also give a shout out to some of the activists in Connecticut that have passed the first bill by the state that is funded to teach AAPI history in the public
Hell
high
yeah.
schools, because a lot of this, Patsy Mink, Vincent Chen, are things that we never learned in school. They're things that we had to go find ourselves or discover through our activism. So that's really wonderful. Other questions? Sorry, this iPad. Okay. Okay. What is your preference on Asian women dating other women? Did you ever publish your plays? How do you overcome Asian hate? Okay, maybe not. Okay.
Well, I can answer the first
Okay.
one. Asian women dating other women? Yeah, cool.
Have you published your plays?
I haven't. Does anyone want to publish one?
Yes. Anyone out there, please
Yes.
contact May.
Let me know.
And yeah, how do you use humor in conversations about race and oppression with your parents?
I mean, I'm lucky in that I come from, I guess, a pretty untraditional Korean immigrant family. I actually learned a lot of my humor from my dad, who is incredibly dry and sarcastic, and I am the smaller female version of him, younger version of him. And so, like, I have an example. When George Floyd happened on May 25th, 2020 in Minneapolis, and for both of us being Minnesotans and being in the Twin Cities during the murder and the uprising, I remember having a conversation with my parents, and I kind of made a joke, but I didn't realize that the joke landed, where I compared the police to Japanese occupiers, and then something like clicked for my dad. He's like, "What? Yeah, fuck the police," and because I was kind of using his just knowing that my parents, and being growing up in South Korea during the time of Korean Reconstruction, and really feeling the wounds of what Japanese occupation did to my family. That was a joke, but it for him, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like, oh, I can actually find a point of relation to why so many Black and brown bodies in the United States have a very rightful mistrust of the police, and trying to equate that to the experience that my parents know. But otherwise, I mean, we just crack jokes all the time, and to ease the tension, but also to try to get our point across. And my dad always is like, "I'm funnier than you, so but having those conversations is really important. May?
Well, my parents are dead, so I can't have those conversations. Sorry, I traumatize a lot of people when I'm on stage. I think humor is really important, right? Because I think even before my parents died, I think when you're talking about hard stuff, for me anyway, a lot of the elders in my community never had to engage in those kind of conversations. They were thinking about surviving, right? How do I make sure I have a roof over my head? How do we make sure we have food? And so this is why when they see their children going into the arts or being an English major or something, they freak out. They're like, are you going to survive? That was actually not my story. My parents were fine with me. Because I showed them that I could take care of myself, right? They just needed the assurance that I could take care of myself. But I think that humor is so important, and talking down to them is not the way. I've seen so many young Asian American folks want to engage their parents or elders or other community members in these conversations, but they do that by shaming them.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you say this? How dare you do that? You need to work on this. And I'm like, that's not where you approach it. I've done theater with Hmong elders who, during the course of our we're just kicking it. We're trying to put together a show. I worked with these Hmong elders, and said, hey, you can name the show. They decided to call the show Old Gangster Ladies. I'm like, okay, let's do that. And I remember the other actress, Hmong actress, and I, younger actress, and I talked to them, and we were curious about their views about homosexuality, right? So my friend just asked them, so Grandma, what do you think about, women dating women? And she was like, I don't care. At this age, you date whoever wants you, And then it made me realize, and this is a very Christian woman too, so, but it made me realize just as we've evolved, they've also evolved. And so I think we need to approach them knowing they've also lived a long life, and their values may have changed, and we need to approach them acknowledging all of that.
Yeah, I think the one thing I've realized as I'm getting older, even though I'm trying to pretend I'm not, is that everybody has a sense of humor. Everyone is funny. And using comedy is a really great way to because I've talked with elders out in the community too, and they don't want to talk about hard shit in a serious matter. Do you remember back in the day you faced this and this is how this was continuing? No, they want to laugh. And I think if you can figure out, and I know that within our communities we have language. We speak different languages, and there are different language barriers, but that's why there's always physical comedy too, that I always really like. And I always think that the funniest people are the elders. I think Korean grandmas out in H Mart are the funniest people in the world,
especially near the dried cuttlefish.
Yes.
They are really funny.
Yeah, and you could hear there are how many times I've heard, Korean ajumas in H Mart holding peppers, and because we call it gochu is, pepper, but also gochu is the euphemism for penis, and they're all making gochu jokes, and it's people want to laugh, and I think if we can approach it like that in terms of talking about race and oppression, I think, the tides will churn.
Thank you. What is coming up for FAWK? Have you thought about starting a podcast? This is a question. If invited back by the festival, would you come back to perform perhaps in future years? What's sort of next up for FAWK and both of you?
Well, we're tired. I'm going to be honest. No, we're tired. It's a lot of work to do this type of community organizing, to do this field building, to push legislation through, and also to put together a show, because we self-produce, we write all of these grants, we're self-funded. And so right now we're kind of taking the summer off to kind of focus on our individual projects and our individual work, and possibly, fingers crossed, knock on wood, we get this funding, because then we're going to be going to Asia in the fall to start looking at how other countries build their arts infrastructure and their arts building. But I'm personally am working on a project called the 20-Year Curse, which is based upon my curse and my family's curse after meeting with a Korean shaman. It's a comedic show. Yeah.
Well, to answer your question, if we are invited back, I think, totally down to do a comedy set.
Great.
What are you working on, May?
I'm working on a web series called Hmong Organization, which is a show about, it's like The Office except for Hmong people and a nonprofit, and they're very ratchet. That's what it is.
Please check them out. I wanted to thank Naomi and May so much for joining us here today, and all of you online and in the audience for joining us here for this amazing talk with funny Asian women. And I am now a FAWKing fan too, and I hope all of you have become FAWKing fans too. Thank you, Annie, for that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Yes, thank you.
Such a great moderator.
Thank you. And if you want to join us, we'll be hanging out on the hospitality tent in the middle of the green as well, if you want to talk with May and Naomi some more. So thanks so much. And thank you to the festival, to Denise and Tanya and everyone for making this all possible and so easy. So thank you.
Thank you.